Hello dear friends and welcome to the DIY Workshop channel. In this unique and highly detailed tutorial I want to present to you a project that I've put on hold for many years because I never found the necessary time. It's about insulating my parents' apartment. After extensive online research of articles and videos on this subject, I realized that there are still many aspects that need clarification. The questions or uncertainties that I will address in this episode are: what are all the steps to follow for insulating a home? What tools, power tools and material quantities are needed? How long does it take? How difficult is it to insulate your home by yourself, and if it's worth calling a specialized company? So stay with me, watch the entire material and listen carefully because I have condensed a lot of information from technical data sheets and personal advice into a tutorial that is as short as possible but very comprehensive. As you may have already noticed, I presented the location of the apartment within the apartment building, the result of the main stages and the first phase which all the neighbors love, namely the preparation of the exterior walls. You need to remove the dust and if possible use a pressure washer to clean the walls. Stage 2 was the styrofoam cladding. The adhesive mortar consumption for the bonding phase alone is somewhere between 4 and 5 kg per square meter. For insulation I used expanded styrofoam or polystyrene with 10 cm thickness for insulating the apartment walls and 5 cm for the basement and balconies. I made the window sills using 2 cm graphite extruded polystyrene. Due to the waiting time required before applying the panels, I don't think using adhesive foam is the best idea. I recommend using a 2-in-1 adhesive which combines adhesive and joint compound, even though it may be slightly more expensive. This way you can use the mortar for attaching the panels, applying the fiberglass mesh reinforcement and the second layer of adhesive. The mixing ratio is generally between 5 and 7 liters of water for a 25 kg bag of material. Each product may have a different ratio, so it's best to consult the technical data sheet. The easiest way is to mix the components by eye. The consistency that I found ideal for attaching the polystyrene is the one in the video. Mixing should be done at a relatively slow speed to avoid separating the chemical components. For cutting the polystyrene and to minimize mess, I purchased a thermal cutting knife, but I quickly gave up on it because it takes time to heat up, can lead to accidents and the cuts are irregular. The best tool is a polystyrene knife or a saw like the one shown in the images. So don't spend money on a thermal cutting knife like I did. It may be useful for the 5 cm polystyrene, but I don't recommend it for the 10 cm. A cutter can also be a good option for a thinner styrofoam. Another controversial subject for a long time was the method of distributing the adhesive on the surface of the polystyrene panels. The final and recommended method by manufacturers in the adhesive's technical data sheets is the perimeter point method or contour bonding as shown in the pictures. I admit that at first I wasted some material until I got used to the application. According to the technical data sheets, it would be ideal for the perimeter to have a width of about 5 cm and a thickness of 2 cm. The points should be the size of a palm. Depending on the flatness of the wall, of course, you can deviate slightly from these rules. To position the panels correctly, simply press where needed and move them left, right or up, down. Sometimes tapping with the palm can also be helpful. Don't forget to clean excess material around the panels for a tight joint. A very important tool for this phase is a level. A classic one of approximately 50 cm will be exactly what you need. The most important thing is to start straight and level with the first row. I also used a laser level to align with the lower limit of the balcony. It was extremely useful, especially for cladding around the window to leave enough space for the window sills. This level is very inexpensive and useful for any project, whether it's installing suspended fixtures, hanging paintings, mounting shelves, properly gluing wallpaper and many other projects. For a house, you also have the option to use U-shaped metal profiles as a base for the plinth. These profiles can be found in simple form or with a drip edge, which is a protrusion to prevent water from flowing on the wall. It is recommended to lay the panels in a staggered panel. Due to obstacles, shapes and balcony dimensions, I couldn't fully follow these guidelines, but it would certainly be much easier for a house. Stage 3 was filling the gaps with polyurethane foam. Here it's very simple, but in case you haven't used polyurethane foam before, shake the container well and holding it upside down, insert it into the spaces that need filling. The expansion and complete drying time takes a few hours, after which the excess foam is removed with a cutter. Let's move on to stage 4, which is the insertion of anchors for the thermal system. I used dowels with a length of 16 cm and a diameter of 10 mm for the 10 cm expanded polystyrene. For the 5 cm polystyrene, I used dowels with a length of 9 cm and the same diameter. Here I advise you to clean the holes thoroughly after drilling. If you don't do this, the nail won't go all the way in. Ideally, all the anchors should be flush with the polystyrene after being hammered in. An extremely important clarification is that percussion should not be used on the drill on brick walls, otherwise you will damage the bricks and the dowels will have nothing to anchor to. I have added a video showing a clear difference between drilling with percussion and without percussion in bricks. It will certainly take more time and you will break more drill bits, but it's worth the extra effort to prevent your insulation from flying off during the first storm. As for positioning the dowels, there are several recommended options. I chose to position them at the joints and in the center. Theoretically, it is recommended to use 6-7 dowels per square meter. Stage 5 is covering the anchors with adhesive. This is done very easily with the help of a trowel, as shown in the video. Stage 6, and probably the most challenging for a first attempt, was creating the window sills. I learned a lot working on the first window, so for the second one everything went perfectly. To start with, I used 2 cm thick graphite extruded polystyrene, which I glued to the wall and the polystyrene using adhesive foam. To ensure a strong and quick bond with the foam, you need to follow the instructions on the can, which are as follows. Wet the surface you will be attaching the panel to very well. I used a simple water spray bottle. Apply a thick layer of foam around the perimeter and in the center of the panel. Then wait for the indicated time, approximately 10 minutes. Only then can you press the polystyrene into place. It is crucial to respect the waiting time, otherwise the foam will continue to expand and push against the panel, causing unevenness. To ensure a proper bond, I used several leftover pieces of polystyrene as support columns. Then, using a notch trowel, I created a bed of adhesive for inserting the corner pieces, sealing profiles and the drip edge profile. Don't forget to use pieces of reinforcing mesh at the corners. I removed the excess material around the window with a putty knife and wiped the frame clean with a clean cloth so that the sealing profiles could adhere to the window frame. Then I attached the sealing profile and applied the exterior corner piece. Due to the large window sill, the mesh of the sealing profile and the corner piece did not overlap, so I used other mesh fragments to join them. With the help of the putty knife and the trowel, I thoroughly embedded the mesh in the adhesive. There's no need to spend too much time on the finishing touches because that will be done with the second layer of adhesive. I repeated the process all around the window. Since the camera ran out of storage space, I couldn't capture a small but important part which I mentioned earlier for this stage. Both on the exterior and interior corners, another piece of mesh will be applied to prevent cracks from appearing. The first mistake I made with the window sills was starting this stage when the sun was still strong, so I had to periodically moisten the adhesive. In almost all the technical data sheets of the materials and for all stages of this job, it is recommended not to work directly under the sunlight, so try to apply the material in a cool and shaded area. The second mistake was that I rushed and didn't cut the profiles to the correct length before starting the work. The third mistake was starting with embedding the mesh and finishing the bottom seal because material from the upper part kept falling onto it. so start from the top to bottom with the insertion of profiles and the basic finishing. It's not a problem if the mesh pattern remains visible through the adhesive at this stage. Step 7 is applying the fiberglass mesh.
Dorele! Ne mișcăm și noi mai cu talent? Imediat, avem. Acum dau bine la gogule? Le-ai acolo că dai bine.
Se poate.
The adhesive consumption for this phase is generally between 4 and 5 kilograms. I started by applying the adhesive from the bottom up using a trowel in approximately equal sections with the width of the mesh, about 1 meter. Here it's important to remember that the mesh sections should overlap by about 10 centimeters, and for a uniform application it would be ideal to do it continuously without breaks. I then started embedding the mesh from top to bottom. It would be ideal to have an extra pair of hands as assistance. The best advice for this stage is to use a slightly thicker layer of adhesive to apply the mesh faster and easier. I applied a thin layer and it was quite difficult to make the adhesive come out through the mesh and cover it. At this stage, it's not a problem if the mesh pattern remains visible, it will be covered with the second layer of adhesive. I want to mention that working with a large trowel didn't make the process faster. I recommend using a simple trowel because it is lighter and you can apply pressure to cover the mesh with adhesive more easily. This is how it looks after applying the first layer of adhesive and the fiberglass mesh. The second layer will be applied up to the white line of the ceiling profile and the decorative plaster layer will be applied on top of it. Underneath the yellow protective cover there is another adhesive tape on which you can stick a film to protect the window during the application of the layer of decorative plaster. Stage 8 in my opinion is a very easy one, which is the application of the second layer of adhesive after allowing 24 hours for the first layer to dry. I mentioned the material consumption in stage 7. Although I was afraid that I wouldn't be able to apply the second layer evenly, I found that if I make the mixture softer, the adhesive spreads just perfect. Also, at this stage there's no need to spend too much time on finishing if you are planning to texture the surface. Some craftsmen say that the texturing phase is not necessary because the decorative layer will be applied on top anyway. However, I wanted everything to look well finished and beautiful, especially for this tutorial. Texturing is done a few minutes after applying the second layer of adhesive. I purchased this texturing sponge with a relatively thick sponge, which I washed and wrung out very well after each use. This is how the wall looks before texturing, and this is how it looks after. Here is the result after the second layer of adhesive and texturing. Stage 9 is the application of primer for the decorative plaster. It's very easy to do, at least 7 days after applying the second layer of adhesive. The specific material consumption for the product I chose ranges from 200 to 350 grams per square meter. I recommend using the upper limit of consumption as a reference for all materials. In the worst case, you will return any excess products. I didn't know what consistency to expect, but I informed beginners that it is very similar to the consistency of interior wall paint. The primer is usually white, but it will be tinted according to the shade of the decorative plaster you choose. The tint will be lighter than the decorative plaster. The product I chose did not require dilution. Remember that any liquid product should be thoroughly mixed before use. Check the technical data sheet of your chosen product for more instructions. Here's the result after applying the primer. Stage 10 was the application of the decorative plaster, or the so-called wall rendering. Although I was very afraid of this stage, I found that it is not much more difficult than applying the adhesive. The material consumption matched the specifications of the product, which is 2.8 kg per square meter. As you can see in the images, I was slow like a snail and clumsy, especially in the beginning. Even so, I completed the work and illustrated my lack of dexterity precisely to encourage other beginners. It's very important to texture within 5 to 10 minutes after application, depending on the temperature, so ideally you should have someone help you with the texturing. I chose plaster that comes already tinted in a plastic bucket because its application doesn't require much dexterity. As for observations, I would like to mention the following. The most important is the color choice. I opted for a darker color due to the dirt that splashes on the walls during rain. From what I understand, the pigment used for subsequent coloring is not as resistant as the one from the factory, so I tried to use a color from the manufacturer's palette as much as possible. I took samples of plaster from the neighbors and found something in the palette that seemed identical as shown in the images, but in reality the colors did not exactly match because of discoloration in time. Obviously, like in all stages, application should be avoided under direct sunlight or very high temperatures. However, if application needs to be done in high temperatures, as was the case for me, professionals advise that adding a cup of water during material mixing can help. After doing this, material losses decreased significantly and application became easier. Plaster must be applied continuously to avoid visible joints. Don't spend too much time texturing in one spot, as it may remove the particles that give the desired texture. For a bark-like texture, only perform up and down movements. Now it's time to answer the remaining questions from the introduction. How long does it take to insulate your home by yourself? As a beginner, it took me a total of 16 calendar days of work to insulate an area of approximately 60 square meters, including rendering. I lost a lot of time on balconies and maneuvering around various obstacles such as pipes and cables. For the most part, I had someone to hold the mesh, prepare the material mixture and do the cleanup. With the knowledge and dexterity I have acquired now, I'm confident that I could shorten the execution time, but not significantly, as the number of workers is the most important factor for time efficiency. How difficult is it? This depends on the number of workers, their skills, determination and physical condition. For me, I can say that it was a bit of a challenging project because it was my first time, I worked under time pressure and there were many hours of intense physical activity. Is it worth doing the project yourself, or should you hire a specialized company? There are many factors involved, it depends on each person's budget, it depends on whether you are willing to spend your free time working on such a project, it depends on your physical condition and skill level. Some people simply lack the necessary skills and there's no shame in that. Completing this DIY project brought me great satisfaction, and even as a beginner I didn't find it very hard to do. So if I could do it, you can do it too. I didn't know exactly what was involved in insulating a home, but this tutorial will certainly help you make the best decision for yourself. I am satisfied with the final result and I await your opinion in the comments section. And that concludes this tutorial. I know it was quite a long video, but I didn't want to create multiple parts just for the sake of more views. I tried my best to accurately illustrate all the steps and provide as much advice as possible so that you can learn from my mistakes. If you enjoyed this tutorial and appreciate the effort I put into it, please consider watching other interesting videos on this channel, subscribe to be notified of future interesting tutorials, it's completely free, give a thumbs up and share with others who are interested in do-it-yourself projects. The administrator of the DIY Workshop channel thanks you for watching and wishes you success in your endeavors. Goodbye!